Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Strategy Talks and Mechanics Guide series. And this is the final episode, at least intended to be the final episode, of a three-part mini-series that I'm intending to release, which is why insert specialty specialists are best. And this one is to discuss berry specialists. Now, I'm sure this is probably one of the more awaited ones, because I'm probably one of the biggest berry focused players in the community, as what you could say, which is interesting because I don't really consider myself to be a berry focused player. I think of my approach as a much more balanced approach, and I hope that this series actually goes to show that, because I do think that there are strengths in all the specialties, and I really wanted to highlight what each one can do. But I think that a lot of the community widely ignores berry specialists, and I think that's largely because they aren't that engaging. Skill specialists, you have the dopamine hit when you see them proc their skill. Ingredient specialists, cooking is fun. It's very engaging to figure out how to best plan around making the strongest meal. It's not so fun to be like, okay, I've got my meganium, my mat lapis, let's throw it on the team and then forget that it's there and just let it sneaky snack or whatever. That's not a fun, necessarily a traditionally... It's not an engaging way to play. For some players, it may be fun, though. But I think they have potential that a lot of players are missing out on. So this is the video on why I think berry specialists are best. Now, first, let's talk about modifiers. So, in the game, there are a lot of modifiers that come up during events. Sometimes we see a 1.5 times boost to cooking strength. Other times we see a 1.5 times boost to skill trigger rates. Sometimes we'll even see just like a 1.25 boost to skill or trigger rates or something like that. Sometimes we'll see a +1 to ingredient productivity per proc, which ultimately ends up netting like less than 25% ingredient productivity for level 60 mono ingredient Pokemon, I think is kind of how that maths out, if I'm remembering correctly. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but nothing is even close to as powerful as the modifier that berry specialists are given every week and can be guaranteed if you're good about planning, and that is Favored Berry. Favored Berry is a 2x modifier, which not even the most powerful event gives us a 2x modifier on ingredients or skills. Now, there's probably a reason for that, because without it, that 2x modifier, berry specialists are the weakest. But having that specialization makes it so that, at least compared to generalist skills options, if you have them at the right level, they're going to almost always outperform if you have the right sub-skills and level and all that jazz. But yeah, unless you're going to green grass or during some sort of event where the berries are randomized anyway, you can always prep around it and always have that bonus apply to the berry specialist you're running, as long as you have your options. And unless you're going to green grass, there is zero RNG in what is going to be good for you during any given week as far as berry specialists goes. Now, another big interesting thing about them is that they have uncapped potential. And this is where we see a lot of ingredient-focused players using berry specialists as kind of like supplementary to their ingredient specialists, because an ingredient specialist only really gains a majority of their strength out of producing the base components for a meal. Once they've produced the base components for a meal, all that filler ingredients, that extra filler doesn't really contribute much in terms of Snorlax strength. And if you're just using an ingredient specialist for filler, it's likely the case that you would have been better off running a skill specialist or a berry specialist in its place. Maybe even an off-type berry specialist would be better than an ingredient specialist producing filler. So they are limited. They are hard-capped to they're soft-capped to the meal size that you're crafting, and hard-capped to the ingredient pot size that you have. So because you can only put so many ingredients into the pot to begin with. So, no matter what, there becomes a point where it is just redundant and useless to include more ingredient specialists, no matter how good they are. A berry specialist, on the other hand, it's producing berries. Snorlax will eat as many berries as you give him. So they are uncapped in how much productivity they can produce. Now, this is relatively true about skill specialists as well, but many of the skills are very similar in their potential. Very similar. There's a hard cap to how much Tasty Chance boost you can get. There's a hard cap to how big you can make your pot size. There's a hard cap to energy. Many of the skills have a limitation. Now, there are some that are uncapped, and theoretically, with good enough RNG, can outperform your berry specialists, but for a large majority of them, they are also capped in their potential. Berry specialist, not a single berry specialist is capped like that. Additionally, berry specialists are stronger in the early game. If you do not have access to skill seeds. Now, if you have access to a large amount of skill seeds in the early game, skill specialists are probably going to be better. But at least we're making the comparison between berry and ingredient specialists. You really won't have enough ingredient producers to really do well enough playing the ingredient game. Early game meals are much weaker compared to late game meals, and we don't really see the point where meals overtake berries in strength until way later in the game. And if you don't, like I said, if you don't have access to those skill seeds to max out your skills Mons levels, their main skill level is where they're getting a lot of their strength from. They're not going to be that useful without a max level main skill. So they're very expensive, especially when you're limited per month on how many main skill seeds you can get. But Berrymons, they'll provide strength right away, and especially if they're a lower value Berrymon, a lower value Berrymon, so like a Butterfree or Pikachu, Raichu, which everyone gets a Raichu, that you can re-roll right away, theoretically, if you're willing to soft reset. You can get those Pokemon that are really good almost right away. Now, additionally, berry specialists are arguably the easiest to do a long-term hunt on. As far as a Berrymon goes, you want two things. Berry Finding S, which there's one sub-skill for that, which is Berry Finding S, and then Speed, which there are two sub-skills, or actually three sub-skills, and a Nature that goes to it. So there's ultimately 4 sub-skills that you're looking for with that. Now, an ingredient or skills Pokemon, they want whatever boosts their specialty, they want speed, and to a much lesser extent, they want inventory. So there's a couple different things that you really could be looking for. Now, inventory is not nearly as important. Additionally, there are 4 natures that boost a berry specialist, but there are only 4 natures that hurt them. And when we look at an ingredient or skill specialist, and we see the natures that hurt them, the natures that hurt them absolutely kill them. A skill chance down nature kills a skill specialist. An ingredient chance down nature kills an ingredient specialist. A speed of help down nature hurts all 3 of them, but ultimately is not so bad that it absolutely kills them. The skills that a berry finder are looking for, Berry Finding S and Help Bonus, are such powerful main skills that they actually they easily counteract the speed of help down nature, comparative to how main skill chance and ingredient finding down works for the other specialties. And just for a quick comparison, Berry Finding S is a single sub-skill, that boosts the Pokemon's productivity for Berry Specialist by 50%. If you wanted that same, or roughly the same comparison on a skills or ingredient specialist, you would need both Ingredient Finding S and Ingredient Finding M, or Skill Trigger S and Skill Trigger M at the same time for a 54% boost. Now, ingredients, they gain additional ingredients at the expense of more of their berries. Granted, berries aren't a huge part of their productivity, you don't really care about them that much, but it's still an expense. You still are losing some sort of productivity in exchange for that ingredient productivity. It's well worth it, but it's an exchange. For Skill Specialist, they don't actually quite gain 54%, even with that 54% skill trigger boost, just because of the way that the numbers kind of work out. if you ever dig into pity procs, I made a video on it a while back. Pity procs are not boosted by skill trigger subskills. They're only really boosted by speed. So it's not really boosting all your skill procs by 54%, and it's going to vary from Pokemon to Pokemon how much it's actually benefiting from the skill trigger subskills. But just know that it's not really the 54% that's promised and you would assume by the numbers that are given to you. Berry Finding S, on the other hand, is a single subskill, not two, and it gives you a flat 50% boost. Now, granted, the natures that boost skill specialists and ingredient specialists boost them by more than what the nature that boosts a berry specialist by is. But ultimately, I think that this is a fair trade-off, since it can't be killed by nature, and overall doesn't make the rarity of I think the rarity of a good berry specialist is easier to long-term hunt. And the final part that goes into that is the fact that the two subskills that you're looking for the most on a berry specialist are Berry Finding S and Helping Bonus, both of which are gold subskills. Now, after you unlock certain badge tiers, gold subskills become guaranteed, which makes them significantly more common in the Pokemon subskill list than even the skill trigger subskills or the help speed subskills that you'd be looking for on an ingredient or skill specialist. And additionally, they don't care. They oftentimes, a really good berry specialist does not need any subskill seeds. Because the only subskill I would consider subskill seeding on a berry specialist really would be Help Speed S into Help Speed M. So that just leaves you with Berry Finding S and a Helping Bonus, which are both gold subskills already at their maximum capacity. And then the Help Speed is like the one that you might subskill seed. Meanwhile, I could see myself subskill seeding at least two on a skill specialist, and that's more likely to be the case because white skills are more common than blue skills. So they're likely lower cost subskill seed-wise as well, making them a much more accessible hunt for free-to-play players. Although it may take more of your biscuits because you may need to reach Friendship level 10. So there are some drawbacks, but overall, long-term, I think they're much more accessible. And then even if you don't have luck with one species, every island has at least 3 options, because every type in the game right now has at least one berry specialist. This was completed with Musharna, released right before Cresselia. Now that every island has, there are always 3 potential berry specialists you could be using on any given week. With most ingredients, there are only like 2, maybe 3 viable options for specific ingredients. And then for skills, they're even more limited. Some skills only having 1 real producer of those skills. And some of them are particularly atrocious, like Tasty Chance S, one of the strongest skills in the game. There's only 1 skill specialist that has it, and it's a 16 pip option. So they are even more restrictive as to what you can and cannot use than even ingredient specialists. So you don't necessarily have to get lucky with... You don't have to get lucky specifically with Dedenne. You don't have to get lucky with Weavile. You can catch the Houndooms. You can catch the Walreins. You can catch the Raticates. You can catch the Alolan Ninetales. There's multiple options for Snowdrop Berry Specialists. There aren't... Meanwhile, with, like, Sausage, you've got, like, Charizard and Aggron. Maybe Tyranitar if you're willing to take a C ingredient. But you probably don't want to do that, because then you're giving up on Ginger. With apples, with Skeledirge, it could also do it, but then you're giving up on apples with Skeledirge. So there's expenses there. Meanwhile, with Berry Specialists, you just have multitudes of options at every island. And they're all decent if you have the right subskills. Additionally, a Berry Specialist has the easiest time leveling. Because you can run them at night with no real drawbacks. A skill specialist is probably going to fill up its skill banking. If not, it'll fill up its inventory, and then it won't produce skills anymore. Ingredient specialist will probably fill its inventory. Then it'll just start sneaky snacking, which is bad for ingredient specialists. On a berry specialist, though, this is oftentimes seen as almost a good thing, which you can run them during the night and gain that XP with no real drawbacks. You can also run them during the day and get the same amount of strength and collect candies on them during the day, which is just, once again, no real drawbacks other than you're not running something else. And inventory is somewhat of a non-issue for them, But they are easier to get ribbons on them if you want inventory for some reason. Like maybe strength carryover from one week into the next on a Sunday night. But the Mons that want the ribbon boosts, the ribbon inventory boosts the most, are the ones that have to make the biggest sacrifices by staying on the team at night to gain those sleep hours. Because they are not optimally run at night. Additionally, playstyle is a non-issue. Sometimes you may think that you're going to be super active, but you end up not being very active. You don't check the app all that often, and you miss out on some Gold Duck procs, or you miss out on some Espeon procs that you weren't expecting. Maybe your ingredient finders dip into sneaky snacking when you thought you wouldn't let that happen today. On a berry specialist, there's really not that much of a difference between how often you're checking. And if you're checking often, it doesn't hurt you. It doesn't necessarily help you to check often, but it doesn't hurt you either. You can just go up, wake up, go to bed, and that's still optimal play. They're easy. They're simple. And then finally, there's endless scaling as we unlock more sub-skills. If an ingredient specialist, or not even unlocking more sub-skills, just more levels. With an ingredient specialist past level 60, unless you have applicable sub-skills after that point, there really is no need to level them past level 60. With skill specialists, you really don't need to level them much beyond level 50, and you only really need to level them there if they have any applicable sub-skills. You can reasonably leave them at like as low as level 25 for most of them, because they just don't scale well beyond that point. Now, this may sound like a bad thing, because you have to put more expense into them, but given that they can level up a lot easier than ingredient and skill specialists, the fact that they can gain something from every individual level helps them in a way that doesn't benefit ingredient and skill specialists as much. The curve is significant enough that if they don't introduce more main skill levels to charge strength, then as early as level 75, a Berrymon will easily be dethroning the charge strength meta for general strength. Because as of right now, if you want a generalist that works well at every island equally, charge strength specialists are hands down the winners. But if they make the berries that powerful, if they make the levels increase that much, they'd have to make main skill level increase as well to keep those Pokemon relevant, because berry specialists would then be stronger even outside of where they have favorite berry, because that's how much the difference is in leveling. Even just small level cap increases. I know a lot of people were underwhelmed when level 65 came out, but that's like a 13% increase to a berry specialist productivity. It kind of doesn't really matter for ingredient and skills mons, as they only increase about 1%. But 13% for berry specialist is pretty insane just by 5 levels. And then finally, the final point about berry specialist is that they are reliable. Nothing is as reliable as a berry specialist in this game. If you're only running for a little bit more and you want to make sure you get so much strength, use a berry specialist every time. A skills mon can vary quite heavily in how many triggers you actually get out of them. Given that their proc rates are pretty low on most skills, the odds are not actually that unreasonable that you can go for hours at a time to not get a single proc. And then suddenly, because RNG is RNG, you could just get 3 back-to-back procs and have one get wasted, because only 2 can bank at a time. Now granted, that'd be pretty rare that you get 3 back-to-back-to-back, but it's still possible, because RNG is a fickle being. And then the pity proc system does exist to counteract this effect a little bit, but even if you're running the absolute fastest possible mon at max energy, you're probably going about 10.5 hours before a pity proc occurs, and about 8 hours and 45 minutes if you're running a good camp ticket, based off my rough calculations in Rain on X. I still wouldn't call that necessarily consistent if you have to wait almost 9 hours for a single proc. It's better than not getting anything, but 9 hours is still a long time to go without a proc. And then ingredient Pokemon also have multiple layers of RNG, but in different ways than skills. Firstly, I mean, it does still have the ingredient rate, but with much higher ingredient rates over skill trigger rates, you're going to go a lot less often where you don't see any productivity at all. Granted, they don't have a pity proc system, though, You're still technically not guaranteed to ever get ingredients. Theoretically, you could run an ingredient specialist. The odds of this would be so incredibly unlikely, but theoretically, you could run one an entire week and get nothing but berries the whole week. The same can't be said about skill specialist. It technically can be said about berry specialist, but the odds are even slimmer. And secondly, RNG comes into play when determining their ingredient slot, which ingredient slot to select. Even if you have a true mono ingredient Pokemon on the 257 spread, in 3 ingredient helps, you are equally likely to get 6 ingredients, 3 procs of 2, as you are to get 21 ingredients, which is 3 procs of 7. There's a more than 3 times difference there. That's very significant. There's a 3.5 times difference there. So there's a very wide range of potential values that you could pull from that makes it so that even once getting past the initial check of finding ingredients, there's another layer of RNG that they're dealing with. And any mixed ingredient spread has it even worse at this point. If you're using an ABB ingredient Pokemon with the intention of farming a B ingredient, then you always have a 1 in 3 chance to not get your desired ingredient at all. So RNG just plays many roles and many layers of RNG involved in getting the ingredients that you want. But then finally, RNG also comes into play when determining final meal value. A lot of players count on crits with Dedenne because they are very, very powerful, but crits wildly change the value of your ingredients. But even if you run Dedenne, other than on Sundays, you still only get an 80% chance of a crit. There's never a guarantee that RNG is going to be in your favor and that you're going to get that crit every time. If you follow, this is kind of an off-topic thing, but if you follow VGC at all, players don't like to run moves that have only 80% accuracy, because that's considered relatively low accuracy in the field of competitive Pokemon. But here, we look at it as, oh, that's nearly guaranteed. It's not nearly guaranteed. There's still a 1 in 5 chance that you miss it, even with an 80% chance of crit. So, consider that. It's lower accuracy than you think. And you can get screwed by RNG. And having 3 layers of that RNG involved leads to potentially that your ingredient specialists oftentimes will not output the strength that Rain on X has promised you. You can't count on them to necessarily get the strength that you see predicted. But Berrymons do have some RNG, but the RNG impact is very little. The only RNG that is there is the ingredient rate, potentially taking up berry generations. But even if you do pull ingredients, if you're smart with the ingredients that you have on your berry specialists, those ingredient procs can probably actually be higher value than the berries they're outputting. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. And the impact by RNG is so minimal that it may as well be negligible on Berrymons because the odds of finding berries is just that much higher. But even if you are concerned about RNG, berry Pokemon are the only ones in the game that have a surefire way of avoiding any kind of impact from RNG so that you can literally know exactly the strength that they will output. With sneaky snacking. None of the other specialties have that benefit. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say go out and sneaky snack all the time because that it may be more beneficial to not sneaky snack at times. Their skill can provide value. There are expenses to sneaky snacking. But if RNG is a problem to you and you want to make sure you know exactly the strength you are going to get, that is a way that you can make sure that you will get that strength. But anyway, that's pretty much all I have to comment about the strengths of berry specialists. I feel like they're probably the most underrated by the community. Again, I wouldn't consider myself to be a berry-focused player. I think of myself as a more balanced player, but think of me as you will. But this has been why berry specialists are best. If you have enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Down in the description, we'll have a link to join the Discord, where you can come and hang out with a cool community of people that talks about all things Pokemon Sleep and the like. I've also got the join button. If you want to show your support that way and are financially capable of doing so, feel free to click it. I don't have any paid rewards for members, but the option is there if you want to show your support that way, and I do give a huge thank you to all my members. As always, I thank you all for watching and hope that you all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye now.